man of God shared the story of a little girl named Delight that was abandoned by her parents in the orphanage that he and his wife owns. He said that when babies are in their mother's womb, they're usually curved, but once they're born, they begin to stretch. When Delight was born, she didn't stretch like other babies. She was curved in such a way that her head was very close to her toe. He carried her like a basket. She could not talk and walk like other kids her age. This pastor and his wife took her to the hospital. The doctor gave the illness a name and said that it was not a common illness. Only 3 people in the world have that kind of illness. At that time, they didn't even know if there was a cure. And even if there was a cure, the cure was not in Nigeria, and most especially was not even in Kwara State where they resided at the time. So the baby grew like that, a curved human. From time to time, the pastor, his wife, and the staff of the orphanage prayed for Delight. They would put her in their midst and pray for God to recreate her. Year after year, they kept praying for her. When visitors came to the orphanage, they would take Delight upstairs and hide her so that the visitors wouldn't see her. One day, while they were going about their normal duties, this pastor's wife heard a scream and ran to the source. When she got there, she saw Rejoice vibrating on the ground. The power of God had hit her, and God had already begun recreating the deformed child. As she was vibrating, she began to stretch. She stretched until she lay flat on the ground. And after a while, she began to stand up. She staggered for a bit, but she later stood up. As if that was not enough, she tried taking a step. She fell. She stood up, took another step, until she walked to where the pastor's wife was standing. While they were shedding tears of joy at God's creative power, Delight spoke her first words. The same baby that it was so hard for them to feed her because they virtually had to bend to where her toe was in order to put food into her mouth. The same baby that laid for years as if she was not a human being was the same baby that stood up, walked, and spoke that same day. The same day that Delight stretched was the same day she stood. The same day she stood up was the same day she walked. The same day she walked was also the same day she spoke her first words. God ensured that he perfected her healing that same day. A few days later, the pastor's wife took her to school and put her in the same class as her age mates. And mysteriously, this little girl understood what she was taught. God is powerful. He recreated the deformity of a full human being in just one day. After hearing this mind-blowing testimony, I began researching on who this great man of God is. The great man of God I was spoken about in this video is Reverend Isaac OMOLEHIN, popularly known as Baba OMOLEHIN. He's over 70 years. He was born on the 24th of February 1951 and hails from Kogi State, which is north central of Nigeria. He's an evangelist that focuses on rural evangelism. Every year, from January to April, he organizes a 12-day crusade that has left thousands of lives transformed. Baba OMOLEHIN is also known as a philanthropist that caters to old people who were mostly abandoned by their children and family members. He's big on charity and helping to meet the needs of the underprivileged. He and his wife operates an orphanage and a rehabilitation center for mentally challenged people. He's married to Dr. Christy OMOLEHIN, and their marriage is blessed with 4 amazing children that are all pastors of various ministries right now. During one of his meetings, he shared a story of how he first manifested God's power in his life. He said he studied animal science in the university and his final year project was on rearing broilers, that is chickens. While he was rearing them, they began to die. He said if the birds die, he would fail his project and he would carry over the course, which meant that he was going to spend an extra year in school. He was already too mature to be in his class, so an extra year was not an option for him. He didn't know what to do. He gathered all the dead birds and knelt in front of them, and he began to cry and pray from the depth of his heart. He told God to help him, that he didn't want to spend an extra year in school. While he was crying and asking God for help, the birds began to come back to life. Miraculously, all the dead birds came back to life and he was able to pass his project. He said, you don't get out of any challenge or problem by ignoring it. You have to pray and confront that challenge with prayers, because God still answers prayers. During Baba OMOLEHIN's sermons, he shares testimonies of God's mysterious acts in the lives of men. One of which was a story of a blind man that approached him in front of a church that he was about to preach for. By the time the blind man approached him, it was time for him to climb the altar and preach. So he told the blind man that he would pray for him after the service. So he called an usher to lead the blind man into the church. Lo and behold, immediately the blind man set foot in the church. His eyes opened. He began to see lights and chairs and people. He was so happy. That day, God made his church heaven on earth. And that is what the church is till today. No wonder the Bible warned us not to forsake the gathering of the children of God. He has made the church a solution ground to all problems of mankind. During the recently concluded wofbec seminar, Baba OMOLEHIN shared the story of how he went for a crusade in America and just one person showed up for that crusade, aside from the pastor of the church and his friend. He said the person was a Cameroonian named Josephine. She was about to be deported from America because she was there illegally. The judge was to pass the judgment the very next day, and the case was against her. She didn't know what to do, so she came for that program to ask God for mercy. After the program that night, she went to the court the next day, and this merciful God showed up. Instead of the judge to pass judgment, having heard from both Josephine's lawyer and immigration lawyers, he asked Josephine if she had anything to say before he passed his judgment. Josephine then said she didn't have the right papers to stay legally in the country, but she had an old mother that was back home in Yewande who depended on her having her current job to survive. If she was deported back to Cameroon and her mother found out, she would die. Josephine then asked the judge to show her mercy. The immigration lawyer stood up to counter what she was saying by saying that America was a law-abiding country, but the judge silenced them. The judge then showed Josephine's lawyer a window in the Constitution that he could use to quickly secure legitimate papers for Josephine. He then told Josephine's lawyer that once he had gotten the papers, he should come back and reopen the case. But for now, the case was adjourned till further notice. Instead of Josephine to be deported, God miraculously used the judge to aid her in securing legitimate papers to stay in America. Even when only one person showed up for that crusade, this merciful God showed up powerfully and miraculously glorified himself. Our God is truly amazing, and I'm so glad that he's using vessels like Reverend Isaac OMOLEHIN to wrought his wondrous power here on earth. My name is Charity Lawrence, and I'm glad you watched this video. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please click on the subscribe icon right now. It's free. You don't need to pay any money to subscribe. Okay, like this video and share with your friends and family. I'll see you all in my next video on Sunday at 8 p.m. Bye.